In the Pokemon TCG, there are certainly cards. Some cards are good, and some of these cards are bad. Okay, I don't really think I need to explain this one. You've probably read the title by now. Today, we're explaining some of the worst Pokemon cards to ever see the light of tournament success. Let's just get into it. Like and hype the video if you enjoy, and be sure to subscribe or whatever if you enjoy, but just let's get into it. Starting off today's video, we have a card that is fundamentally awful for a very good reason, but due to an absolutely bizarre set of circumstances in the 2025 and 2026 Pokemon TCG seasons, it actually found itself winning tournaments. Picnic Basket from Scarlet and Violet base set is an item card that heals 30 damage from each of your Pokemon. That is insanely good. So good that Fresh Water Set, which is an item that only heals 20 from each of your Pokemon, has seen competitive play. However, it obviously isn't that simple, as Picnic Basket isn't just some strict upgrade. Not only does Picnic Basket heal all of your Pokemon for 30 damage each, but it also heals the opponent's entire field. That's right, this card heals literally every single Pokemon on the field for 30 damage. In the Pokemon TCG, most decks aren't capable of just one-shotting everything in sight turn after turn, and lots of these decks, as a result, tend to utilize spread strategies to pick off multiple Pokemon at once through residual damage. So these spread decks can't play Picnic Basket at all, because they'll heal off all the damage they're doing to the opponent. Meaning all OHKO decks should just be playing this card to beat those top tier spread decks, am I right? Well, you'd be wrong if we were talking about anything before the Twilight Masquerade expansion released in 2024, as there were far better healing cards than Picnic Basket available. Professor Turo's scenario was right there, and despite being a supporter card, it can fully heal one of your Pokemon and put it into your hand. This made it an excellent and versatile inclusion for controlling your board's permanence, aka how, permanent something is on your board. But Turo was also great against retreat lock decks like the infamous Snorlax stall deck. So why would you play Picnic Basket, a card that also, again, heals the opponent, when Turo can do a comparable thing at healing your board while also providing great utility? Well, to be honest, you just wouldn't, unless there was some reason you actually wanted to heal the opponent. But when would you ever want to do that, am I right? I mean, healing your opponent's Pokemon just sounds like throwing in concept, doesn't it? But in practice, Picnic Basket became vital for most decks to fend off against one of, if not the most game-changing cards introduced in Scarlet and Violet, Munkidori. Munkidori has the Adrenabrain ability, which once per turn allows you to move up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon, so long as Munkidori has a Darkness Energy attached. Despite only seeing play in Gardevoir EX decks initially, the latter half of the 2025 season was completely dominated by Munkidori. Gardevoir was dominating the metagame, Dragapult was playing Munkidori to counter opposing Munkidoris, and in Destined Rivals, Marnie's Grimmsnarl EX had perfect synergy with the Chunky Monkey. What's noteworthy about Grimmsnarl specifically though is that it was built around the Frostlass Munkidori combo. Frostlass from Twilight Masquerade has the Freezing Shroud ability, which places 1 damage counter on every Pokemon in play who has an ability in between every turn, except for any Frostlass. This means you can use Frostlass to damage your own Munkidoris and then use Adrenabrain to deal damage, either to the active or to set up spread knockouts on your opponent's bench. And this combines super well with Grimmsnarl's attack Shadow Bullet or the TM Devolution tool card, which de-evolves all of the opponent's Pokemon, usually lowering their HP. So in a shocking twist of events, Picnic Basket became sort of a trio killer for the top of the meta. It matched up well into Gardevoir because Gardevoir was a spread deck with Munkidori that also liked leaving damage on their board, whether on the Screamtail or Drifloon they were attacking with, or from retreating Gardevoirs earlier in the game. Dragapult hated seeing Picnic Basket, as its Phantom Dive attack spreads 200 to the active and 60 to the bench in any way you like. This means that one Picnic Basket can heal at the absolutely 60 damage from your board against a Dragapult attack. But Grimmsnarl was the deck that hated Basket the most, as Basket would serve as a reset to the damage that Frostlass built up over multiple turns from both sides of the field. This led to ridiculous value for just one item card, and it was really value that changed the course of games. So if there was some turbo aggressive deck that could only take one-hit knockouts anyway and needed some healing to demolish the top strategies, it should have a pretty solid shot into the metagame. Enter Gholdengo EX. With its coin bonus ability providing card draw every turn and its 1 energy attack one-shotting every Pokemon ever made, this is one of the best aggressive attackers of all time, no doubt, and it just so happened to benefit from Basket extremely well. Basket healing your board was very nice to have into all of the top decks, and since you only took one-hit knockouts anyway, there was no damage that you really needed to heal off your opponent's board, because it wouldn't be a detriment to your strategy in any way. In fact, healing the opponent was often way better than just healing yourself, because in some matchups, it could completely screw up their math and lead to free wins. At the 2025 World Championships, Landon Kettler placed 9th place with Picnic Basket in his Gholdengo EX list, and a large percentage of Dango players at Worlds were running the card. After Lunatone and Solrock released in Mega Evolution, however, Monkey Dory, who was once a staple of the Gholdengo archetype, was no longer a perfect fit since he didn't need dark energies, and it had to be forced in if anything. Needing some extra healing to solidify matchups, Dango Rocks players would almost always play Picnic Basket, and Daniel Magda would win the Gdansk Regional Championships with Picnic Basket in his list. Despite seeing play in other archetypes very occasionally, Picnic Basket, an on-paper horrible card, found a niche in Standard and became a metagame staple because of it. However, this more so speaks to how broken Monkey Dory is specifically, but stay tuned for my next video as I will go more in depth on that card. Our next card is one from Paradox Rift that at first glance, and second glance, and third glance from the average player looks atrocious, but through the lens of a very small subset of control players, it was incredibly strong. Nacli from Paradox Rift isn't even a fully evolved Pokemon, yet it saw more play than both of its evolutions combined. It only has 70 HP and does a pitiful 10 damage for 1 fighting energy, but this is actually what made it so good, funnily enough. Nacli's only attack, Corner, prevents the opponent's active Pokemon from retreating during the opponent's next turn, meaning that liabilities can get stuck in the active for quite a while. However, what was great about Nacli was that it was a fighting type Pokemon, meaning that most psychic Pokemon resist its attacks as well as most flying type Pokemon. This category of Pokemon that resist Nacli includes some of the most common bench-sitting liabilities in the game, like Latias EX, who just is there to provide free retreat, Noctowl, who is useless after evolving, Squawkabilly, who's useless after the first turn, Monkey Dory, who rarely ever attacks, Pidgeot EX, who is really just there for its ability, and Mew EX for the same reason. These Pokemon rarely attack during competitive matches and are just there for support. So if they got into play, Nacli could just retreat lock them for 0 damage, which is so powerful. I made an entire video on it. You can check that out for this one. Shameless plug. Anyways, with cards like Accompanying Flute, which reveals the top 5 cards of the opponent's deck and forces any number of basics onto their bench, as well as Erica's Invitation to rip a basic Pokemon from the opponent's hand and put it straight in the active spot, could be used to poach these liabilities and trap them with Nacli, who was eventually named the best retreat locker in the standard format after the 2025 rotation. However, not only was Pidgeot control completely dead at the time, but Destined Rivals introduced Ethan's Sudowoodo, who had higher HP and less retreat cost than Nacli, so it was a bit of a short-lived run for the little guy. However, much later on in 2025, right before rotation, Nacli cropped up again and was used either instead of or alongside Sudowoodo. This is because Sudowoodo actually does 10 more damage, which usually doesn't matter because you're hitting for resistance, but against liabilities without a fighting resistance like Lunatone, Solrock, Pheasantipity, or Blood Moon Ursaluna EX, it made a massive difference, equivalent to half as many turns to trap them. So Nacli could not only trap fighting resist like Sudowoodo, but it could also buy time against liabilities who didn't resist fighting. Unfortunately, Nacli just rotated in 2026's standard format rotation, so Sudowoodo is now pretty much the dominant option since it's searchable by PokePad. But I do find it pretty funny how Nacli was doing really well in control decks, even placing second at Toronto Regionals 2026 in the senior division in Camille B's list. This just goes to show that sometimes evolving in the Pokemon TCG isn't really worth it, which I also, funnily enough, have a video about, which you can go watch after this one. I feel kind of shameless this video, not gonna lie, with all the plugs, but hey, life's a sandwich, and no matter the way you flip it, the bread comes first. Speaking of bread, the last card I'll talk about today is by far the most successful, largely because it's been around for a very long time due to reprints. I'm talking about the best, worst card in the game, Pokémon Catcher. Now, Pokémon Catcher was once completely broken. It was just boss's orders on an item card until 2013 when it received an errata because it was so good. Imagine what the standard format would be like right now if Counter Catcher was just playable on every turn, no matter if you're behind on prizes or not. That's what it was like playing the game back then. After the errata, Pokemon also printed Lysander, which is identical to modern day boss's orders. So with Lysander available and VS Seeker being printed to be able to recover Lysander, Pokemon Catcher went from one of the best cards in the game to pretty hard to justify playing. But this card almost always finds a way to succeed in standard formats, usually in ultra aggressive strategies that want to use their supporter for turn on something other than boss. For example, in the 2024 and 2025 seasons, Pokemon Catcher had an incredible run in big basic ancient decks. These decks rely on the supporter card Professor Sawdust Vitality, which attaches 1 basic energy to each of 2 ancient Pokemon in play and draws 3 cards. This energy acceleration and draw power is incredible and worth building your deck around. and the main decks built around it were Raging Bolt EX and Roaring Moon EX. Raging Bolt is a 240 HP basic dragon Pokemon with no weakness, a 1 energy attack that discards the hand to draw 6, and a 2 energy attack that does 70 damage for each basic energy you discard from your Pokemon in play, capable of one-shotting anything in the game. Now, for an ultra aggressive deck like this, you'd normally want to play a high boss's orders count to chase bench sitters in the early game and pick off low HP evolving Pokemon in the early game. But 90% of your turns are spent using Sada to power up your board and keep attacking, meaning you can't really play boss that often. So, needing an item-based gust option, Prime Catcher became the dominant A-spec card in the deck. But you can't just gust one time every game relying on one item card in your entire deck. So to be able to gust more frequently, countless players decided to play Pokemon Catcher at between a 2 and 4 of count. This made the deck more aggressive in theory. By in theory, I mean, if you flip heads. And if you didn't, knocking out the active wasn't always that bad in this style of deck. Also, by playing a ton of catchers in your list, the odds that you hit heads on at least one of them throughout every game goes pretty high. Caleb Gettimer would win the Louisville Regional Championships with 2 Pokemon Catcher in his Raging Bolt list. And this card was a permanent staple of Raging Bolt for most of the 2025 season until the rotation where we lost Pokestop. Roaring Moon EX also played Pokemon Catcher very frequently after the 2024 standard Pokemon rotation. This is because the deck lost Cross Switcher to rotation, which was a 2-piece combo card that switches your active to the bench and then gusts an opponent's bench Pokemon to the active spot. So it was basically like Prime Catcher, but you had to play 2 cards at the same time. Roaring Moon was another deck that needed to change Sada's vitalities to keep attacking, so Pokemon Catcher and Prime Catcher became dominant inclusions. Roaring Moon with 4 Pokemon Catcher placed second at the World Championships in 2024 at the hands of Senosuke Shiokawa. But Pokemon Catcher was also played at a 4 of count in the world's winning deck that year, Iron Thorns EX. This deck only played 4 copies of Iron Thorns EX, energy cards, and trainer cards, since Iron Thorns' ability initialization disables all rulebox abilities if it's in the active spot. So by playing just 4 Iron Thorns EX, initialization was always active for the opponent. The deck did already play 3 Boss and Prime Catcher as its ace spec, but Pokemon Catcher was key because Iron Thorns doesn't really deal that much damage, and combined with the control elements of the archetype, it often needed to chain Gusts and get rid of key Pokemon off the bench as part of its matchups. So this way you could afford to play a supporter like Colress's Tenacity to get your energy, and you could maybe Gust in the same turn if you flipped aheads. All the while sending the Pokemon that got KO'd to the Lost Zone with the Lost City Stadium card, which sends all Pokemon that get knocked out while it's in play to the Lost Zone to never be seen again. This was the way you could beat decks like Gardevoir that could keep recycling cards like Fluttermane to disable initialization. Since you Lost Zoned their Klefki and Fluttermane, Gardevoir couldn't use its ability ever again at that point. Pokemon Catcher was key to both the first and second place decks at the World Championships, despite being literally nerfed into the ground and turned into a gimmicky coin flip card. Right now, Catcher is pretty bad, largely because most decks are built to run 3 to 4 bosses orders and don't rely on coin flips or a specific supporter to win games. But I'm 100% sure we will see more of Pokemon Catcher in the future, despite being a pretty inconsistent and bad card. And that's the video. I've been wanting to make videos like this talking about underused or bad Pokemon cards for a while, so let me know if this is something you want to see more of in the future. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed, and as always, take care, have a good one, bye.